Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and if you are current on the podcast, you are probably like, what the heck is going on here? Because this isn't normally how we do things. Normally we got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and each episode comes out at like 10 p.m. Mountain Time the day before. So Sunday night at 10 p.m. roughly is what we shoot for. That Monday morning, first episode of the week comes out, and then we play some little music, and then we number them all. So, it's pretty straightforward. The fives and the zeros, they're always Fridays. And the ones and the sixes, if that's what an episode number ends in, it's always a Monday. Look, I take pride in this organization part of it. I want this to be searchable and usable. I want it to have a rhythm to it, a degree of predictability, and I understand I am messing with that a little bit right here as we round out the book of Matthew. And the reason is, the end of the year where I'm recording this, it just has 5 weekdays too few. And I really want to wrap up Matthew 1 at episode 800 because I want to be able to say, hey, the first 800 episodes of the podcast, it's all the book of Matthew. I think it's easy and it's going to make it easier for people to get around and know what they're doing. But 2, I'm not done yet. I think we need to wrap up some loose ends and talk about what happens next. And I think we need to take the last day or two of our conversation and just look back, like, what was Matthew going for here? And did he achieve it? Oh, well, it all works out. We're talking about what happens after, and we are into the book of Acts. You got the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Luke, in particular, is he's a doctor. He's a traveling companion of the Apostle Paul, who doesn't come up in the Gospels at all. We meet Paul, roughly a third of the way into the book of Acts. He's an antagonist at first who is sent out by the religious leaders who want to destroy the remaining followers of Jesus. These upstarts, these rebels, as long as there are people talking about Jesus like he's the Messiah, there exists a continuing threat to the religious leadership class who currently have a monopoly on the role of mediator between God and man. So what if they're not particularly good at it? It pays great, it's politically expedient, and it's one of those jobs where you can't really lose it. You either have it forever and stuff is okay, or you lose it and suffer total social and financial ruin. You can't really ramp down from this. Your bed is made. You're vested. And at this point, they have shed blood over this whole issue. They had a guy convicted and killed. They let a murderer insurrectionist guy go to make sure that Jesus would get executed by the state. And they did it publicly, and everybody knows they did it, and also there's no body. So there's a lot of pressure as we get into what happens next, which occurs a handful of weeks. I guess we can say pretty neatly, it happens around 50 days after all of the business with Jesus' death and resurrection. And the religious leaders have not got what they want. Things are heating up, not simmering down, even though the disciples have laid fairly low during this time. They've been up in Galilee for a good chunk of this time. Well, the book of Acts opens with Jesus still on screen. There are red letters in the book of Acts. He still has lines. The opening sentences of the book of Acts tell us that Jesus is hanging out with the disciples for many weeks, about 40 days in total. There's this interaction between them. He's teaching them stuff about the kingdom. He's finishing out the equipping phase. It's kind of like a big, giant, monstrous post-resurrection mega power retreat to totally readyify these guys for what's next. And he's hinting that what's next is the arrival of the Holy Spirit, the same one who showed up in the form of a dove back in Matthew 3 at Jesus' baptism, and that what's coming, guys, is the stuff that I talked about in the middle third and the third third of Matthew chapter 10, that the lesser commissioning, the missional discourse that happened right there, like that stuff that was going to be really difficult and challenging. Yeah, that's what's next, but you're going to have the Holy Spirit. Well, when this time wraps up, this is what we get at the beginning of Acts, according to Luke. So when they met together, they asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom of Israel? What an interesting question. And what a natural question coming out of Matthew, right? Doesn't Matthew feel like it wraps up with there's impending judgment here? It feels like there is a reckoning that is due. It feels like the religious leaders need to be on the receiving end of this divine reckoning, that some kind of judgment or public vindication needs to occur so that people will know that Jesus was actually the Messiah, and so they'll sign up for the kingdom and become sons, daughters, children, agents, heirs of the king. It looks like that would be the natural formula. A great big giant spike the football, I told you so kind of moment. And think about how good that would feel to the disciples to just have it all work out and in front of everybody. And everybody would have to be like, oh, we thought you were crazy for quitting your job. And like that pretty girl from high school who kind of quit texting with you because she's like, I don't know. Like it seemed like you were kind of interesting and everything. And I remember we used to go on dates, but then you started following a homeless messianic claimant and my dad's not really into it. And then she ghosts you and you're like, I'm going to show her because there's going to be a reckoning. Like who knows what kind of social pressures were behind these guys asking this question, but they think, I'm like, obvious question. We've kind of covered a lot about the kingdom and all of that's great and everything. But what about like judgment? What about like the big sorting out of things? Is the kingdom of Israel to be restored now? Now, some people look at this and they're like, oh, this isn't just a reckoning for the religious leaders. They're talking about a reckoning for Rome. And they still misunderstood what kind of Messiah this was. They still imagined that Jesus, in a fashion that no doubt Simon the Zealot, one of their number, would have appreciated, is going to go nuclear on Rome and overthrow the empire or something like that. And maybe that's part of what was intended as well. But they're thinking reckoning. But then Jesus says to them, it's not for you to know the times or dates the Father is set by his own authority. Oh, okay, well, that sounds just like what Jesus said in his tempering of expectations about the unfolding of time in the Olivet Discourse that we looked at in, what is that, chapters 24 and 25. But you'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Look, if you just want to turn it off now and not listen to the rest of this one or the rest of tomorrow, right there in that sentence, you got more or less the plot for everything that's going to happen next in terms of the history of Christianity. If you couple that with the Great Commission that we spent the last week looking at, with Jesus saying, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded with you, and I'm going to be with you always until the very end of the age. If you couple that with Jesus effectively saying, yeah, you let me worry about the reckoning and the timelines and all of that, what you're going to do as my family of faith, as my church, is you are going to go out in the power of the Holy Spirit. You guys got a little sampling of that when you went out, when I sent you out back in Matthew chapter 10. But this is going to be like full bore that happens here. And I'm going to need you to go local to Jerusalem. That's going to be Jewish people. And then into Judea, that's going to be Jewish country folk who maybe aren't familiar with all of the going-ons that just happened, all the crazy stuff. It's going to be news to a lot of them. Then you're going to go to Samaria. These are like the half-Jewish people. Now you're getting out to unlikable Gentile, it couldn't possibly be for them, could it, territory? You're going out to, they're not going to be in the new family of faith. Are they territory? Yep, apparently you are. And then you're going out to the ends of the earth. So local, regional, super regional, all of planet Earth, that is the trajectory that Jesus is sending them on. And then just right before their very eyes, he ascends into heaven. And understandably, anytime somebody just levitates into the sky and then vanishes, everybody who's there is going to keep looking at that and squinting and being like, did that just happen? But then while that's going on, two men dressed in white stood beside them and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand there looking up into the sky? The same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. I love it. The last time we saw an angel, and presumably that's who we're getting here, but the last time we saw an angel in one of these accounts, it was the angel sitting on the tomb being like, hey, go. Your instruction is go. Do this next thing. It's action-oriented. Jesus' instruction to the women and to the disciples, go. It's action-oriented. The Great Commission, go. And then this thing happens, and the most natural thing to do would be to, make another altar or something like Peter did last time? I'm like, oh, that's amazing. We saw a heavenly thing. We should build huts or something like he tried to do in Matthew 17 on the Mount of Transfiguration. But instead, they need to be jabbed one more time. Like, hey, the point of what you just saw is for you to go take action in light of that. We'll look further at how things unfolded in that regard next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.